one and all, and listen to tales of excitement and adventure. Tales of daring heroes, savage monsters, and bards who just couldn't keep it in their pants. Tales of friendship, nobility, drunken foolishness, and unforgettable fun. These are tales of role-playing games, fair listeners, and this is Rollin' Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Danishes and Dragons, your RPG morning show. Let me adjust this camera here real quick. My name is Ryan Howard. I am your host and king of the Boneheads. Much better. And today we are going to be building ourselves a pugilist using only official material. So what this is going to end up being is basically a critique of the build guide that we are given in Tasha's Cauldron for how you play a pugilist using official material. Now, this is a topic that I will likely revisit in future videos because I like the idea of playing a pugilist. I really, really do. It seems like a very cool character type, and definitely one that I would myself be interested in utilizing. However, I'm also someone who does not like to rely on non-official material, because a lot of non-official material is very unbalanced. This is not news to anyone who has kind of been around or anything like that. Anyone who's played enough of this game knows that, when it comes to official material, or, excuse me, sorry, when it comes to unofficial material, a lot of it is built around, how stupid powerful can we make this particular thing, especially when it comes to addressing perceived power discrepancies. So, for example, a pugilist does not use weapons. And in a lot of cases, a pugilist is not heavily armored. Now, in this case, they are. Because there is not an official way to have a less powerful pugilist utilizing these rules. And unfortunately, that's just kind of the nature of what we have here. We do not currently have like an unarmored defense feat in one of the official books. At least as far as I know, I couldn't find one. It would be nice if you could take certain class features as feats. It would be nice if I don't think there's going to be another rules expansion. I think we're at capacity as far as rules expansions go for this. But it would be nice if, let's say, in a 5.5 or a full-on 6th edition, Wizards let you take class features as feats. So that you could do things like a fighter with a monk's unarmored defense. Because there's a lot of different kind of archetypes that you can have that would pull from different, versions or pull from different classes. A lot of your kind of, I want to build this fictional character. They're usually just kind of a homogenous gloop. Or not homogenous, that's the wrong word. They're just kind of this mass of different blended aspects from different D&D classes because, obviously they were not made to be a D&D character. They were made to be a comic book character or the protagonist of a novel or something like that. And even when you read the D&D official books and stuff like that, like Dritz does not fit neatly into any of the D&D boxes. He might have in second edition, but if you take a look at the 5th edition rules and you try to, figure out where Dritz goes, what kind of class he fits into, it's a little bit difficult, and there's a lot of argument. And I know Wizards has like official stats for Dritz, but there's a lot of room for debate and a lot of room for, where does this particular person fit. And so for builds like that, where you want to build a very specific character, like if you want to build Geralt of Rivia, you're probably going to want to go fighter, but there's also going to be this compulsion to, make him a ranger, specifically a monster hunter ranger, just because of how, he tracks and stuff like that. When in reality, you're going to want to go Eldritch Knight fighter, because that's more what Geralt does. That's more, how you do the signs and stuff like that is... A lot of that's going to be more covered by an Eldritch Knight fighter, but it would be nice to have some of the ranger features as far as, favorite enemy or being able to track specific types of creatures or things like that. That might be an interesting exercise. I'm sure there are a million different Geralt of Rivia builds online, but it might be interesting. I don't know if I want to go down that route. There's a lot of people who, dedicate a lot of time to building fictional characters outside of D&D in 5th edition. I don't know if I need to add my 2 cents to that particular market, but, might be fun. So, before we get into the Pugilist and all of the stuff that I've kind of built around that for this particular build, let's talk a little bit about breakfast. I had waffles today because we recently got a waffle maker. That's cool. Waffle makers are fun. Yeah. Yes, we're talking about breakfast. Elfie, you are here every week. I don't know. Yes, the waffle maker is in fact tiny. So you make multiple waffles, and because we got it around Christmas time from Target, the waffles have a little gingerbread man on them. So I look forward to using different fruits and stuff to turn that gingerbread man into other things, depending on the season. Maybe someday I will make, like, little gingerbread meeples out of that waffle maker and, be like, hey, this is a wizard gingerbread man, or this is a fighter gingerbread man. That seems like fun. I think that would be pretty fun. But the main thing I want to talk about here, because, waffles have always been this thing that I like. I enjoy them. They're not something I'm going to seek out unless I'm in a very specific mood. I've always been more of a pancakes guy. However, when it comes to waffles, if, I'm in a hotel and they have a waffle maker, or, someone's like, hey, I'm making waffles, if Donkey's coming over, then at that point, I'll be like, yeah, I'll have a waffle. Waffles are fine. Waffle House is fine. Typically, I don't get a waffle when I'm at Waffle House. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on waffles. But the main thing I want to talk about is I've actually committed a bit of a heresy. For anyone who knows me, I am not drinking from a French press today. I am drinking pour-over coffee. Because I was told that's really the right way to do it. And someone got me a pour-over unit for Christmas. So, as my coworkers told me when I told them about this, I've now become even more bougie. That's not really a word that I would use to describe myself. Especially, like, if you look at me, I don't think I'm particularly bougie. I don't know. Maybe if you look at my hair, you might think I'm bougie. But if you see how I dress on a regular basis, you definitely wouldn't think that. When it comes to my coffee, though, I'm a snob. And, yeah, I'm enjoying my pour-over coffee. I will still love my French press, because the French press is great. It is amazing, and I developed a bit of a reputation for always drinking from a French press. Back when I was in the office, I was pretty much known as the French press guy. So I have to still keep up that gimmick somehow. But pour-over coffee is also delightful and delicious, and I love it. So, that's really all of the breakfast chat. For anyone who consumes this show via YouTube, actually, just give me 1 second to... No, I'm going to leave this up here. Don't want the cats getting at it because it has chocolate on it. Scratch all that. Anyway... for anyone who consumes this over YouTube, I do apologize for, in the past, not including timestamps. It's just, something I never even thought to do. But it was pointed out that, some people see the title and don't know that I also talk about breakfast. They don't follow the show. They don't follow me. They'll just see, hey, here's... today we're building a pugilist, or building a battle bard, building an artificer. And they'll want to see that without hearing me talk about breakfast necessarily. So consider this my apology for those of you who consume the show for that reason. There will be timestamps on the YouTube replay now, starting with this particular upload. So there we go. Problem solved. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and mosey on over to screen share, and I will talk a little bit about the pugilist. Alright, here we go. So you guys can see here, this is my build that I've got here for the pugilist. I did this the other day. I was thinking about doing rolled stats, but I decided against that because I just didn't want to do rolled stats. I'm actually gonna... 1 second here. I've got two of these here, things layered behind each other. Which I didn't know I had, but that'll make things easier later, I suppose. I didn't do a whole lot of prep today. I apologize. I'll just change it. Okay, there we go. So yeah, this is the pugilist, as written up in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Now, a couple things that I want to address before we get into this particular build are related to the way that people kind of played the pugilist before Tasha's Cauldron came out. So what we have right here is this was a DM's Guild product. It was designed by Benjamin Huffman. And from everything I've seen, this is actually a really good class. You'll notice that it is a separate class from fighter or from monk. Previously, people rightly thought that if you wanted to be an unarmed fighter, you had to be a monk. Flavor-wise, that never really worked out for me, because there's a huge difference in my mind, and in the minds of most people, between a monk and like a pit fighter, which is, when you're talking about a pugilist, what you're talking about is a pit fighter. This is a person who, goes into the arena with their knuckles wrapped, dipped in broken glass, and is gonna, fight for the entertainment of other people that somehow decided they were gonna become an adventurer. So this pugilist is actually not too terribly bad, and as far as balance goes, it's not awful. what you have here, you get a D8 hit dice, which seems a little bit low for a martial class, but I understand, you don't want to put them on the same level as a paladin or a fighter with hit points because they're not tanks. This is a DPS class. Your primary stats are going to be strength and con, like you're building a fighter. And you are proficient with light armor, simple weapons, improvised weapons, the whip, and the hand crossbow. So the basics here, without getting into all of what you get here, you get fisticuffs, which is similar to like the monk weapon thing. And then you get a feature called Iron Chin, which lets you determine your armor class with Constitution instead of Dexterity when you're wearing light or no armor and you're not using a shield. So basically at that point, if you've got, let's say you're doing the standard array and you take your 14, actually you'd probably take your 14 in strength. So you take your 13 in con with a +1. That allows you to use that instead of dexterity in determining your armor class. This is something that this has over kind of the official version of the Pugilist. Because one thing that I noticed about this, as I said at the top of the show, when you think Pugilist, you don't think of someone who's wearing a lot of armor because they're in an arena. But they're not a gladiator. This is a pit fighter. This is like that scene in Sherlock Holmes where he's in the arena fighting, when you first see kind of his way of fisticuffs and how he kind of breaks down a fist fight. That's more what you're dealing with here. This is a John L. Sullivan situation where the character's probably not wearing a shirt, doesn't have any weapons, they've got their hands wrapped and stuff like that. So, the most you'd be looking at here, unless you want to get super crazy creative with, how you're wearing armor or your explanation for why your character's wearing armor, is that, you have lighter armor, but you've got a strong jaw, which lets you take a lot of punishment. And then one thing that this lets you do is, when you take the attack action with an unarmed strike or a pugilist weapon, you can make an unarmed strike or grapple as a bonus action. So, right off the bat at first level, you can make 2 attacks. It's like being a dual wielder. You can also grapple, which this is one thing that I think Tasha's actually makes a little bit better than what fisticuffs would do here. And then, at second level, you get Moxie, which is your... this is similar to, like, your key points. This is your Moxie points. These are, some maneuvers that you can do. The old 1-2 is basically flurry of blows, stick and move, brace up. Yeah, it's basically taking monk features. This particular class is a mix of... It's a mix of monk and rogue. With like a... kind of a back alley flavor to it. And that's where a lot of the rogue comes in. Here's a good example of rogue stuff. You get a feature called Street Smart at second level that lets all of your, carousing, shadowboxing, and sparring count as light activity for the purpose of resting. And then once you've rested or caroused in a settlement for 8 hours or more, you know the streets. Like, you know where everything major is. And then, you get some damage reduction here at third level. When you're reduced to half your maximum hit points or less, you can use your reaction to gain temporary hit points equal to your pugilist level plus your constitution modifier. So yeah, once you're up at like level 10, you're looking at like 15 extra hit points here if you max out your con at that point, which is definitely something you should do. Especially with a class like this, you want to max out your strength and your con. And a lot of this stuff kind of precludes different feats that you might have to take. So if you were playing this particular character, you wouldn't need to necessarily invest in Tavern Brawler or stuff like that would eat up your ability score improvements, which you get a lot of. You get kind of a similar number of ability score improvements that a fighter would get. And then you learn your fight club, which kind of gives you different levels of, or different kind of focuses. It's your subclass, basically, is your fight club. And of course, you get an extra attack at 5th level because you're a martial class. And you can gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for a minute as a bonus action at 4th level, which, again, more damage reduction. And there's more stuff that comes in here. I want to real quick talk about some of the fight clubs that you can get here, because a lot of these are really cool, and as a wrestling fan, I really enjoy some of what we see here. Because first of all, what you're getting is Arena Royale, which basically lets you become a luchador, which is amazing. Then you get Bloodhound Bruisers, and this is like a pet class. Actually, no, Bloodhound, that's Dog and Hound. Bloodhound Bruisers, this is the one that's really cool. Bloodhound Bruisers basically lets you play Sherlock Holmes from that Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes movie. You're like this old pulp character Slam Bradley, who Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created after they created Superman. Basically, you are like a street detective who fights people. If you want to play, like, I don't know, Shaft in D&D, or if you want to play Daredevil, this is probably, if you multi-class this with Monk, you could probably get pretty close to Daredevil. Just getting more coffee here. And this is something that I definitely want to try to create in an official capacity. I want to figure out how to replicate this particular subclass here, the Bloodhound Bruisers. Because that's a character that I would definitely be interested in playing. In fact, Kieran Devitt was kind of supposed to be this, but he used weapons. So yeah, I am super interested in this. Dog and Hound is a pet class, which doesn't really make sense here. And then Piss and Vinegar, this is another, like, this is another wrestling one. Some of these are kind of cheesy. You know, like, you're playing a professional wrestler in D&D, but this one lets you be, like, a heel, basically. And then Squared Circle, this lets you be, like, a technical wrestler. So this one focuses a lot more on grappling. And then Sweet Sciences is, you know, this is, that's boxing, basically. I do remember when this class first came out, the only two that were available to you were Squared Circle and Sweet Sciences. It seems like they've definitely added to this. But again, this is all kind of water under the bridge. I just wanted to, you know, show you guys this. They also included some awesome magic items and just regular weapons. So that, you know, like you can use brass knuckles. Because brass knuckles aren't really a thing in 5e. But yeah, they've got some cool stuff, with magic weapons for your unarmed characters. That's something I noticed trying to DM for a monk, was there's not a lot of magic items that you can get to up your damage if you're doing a lot of unarmed strikes. And that's definitely a problem we have with this particular build. So, like, if you're Adventurers League or something like that, and you can't do any kind of outside unofficial material, that might be a bit of a problem for you. If you're just at a table game where the DM doesn't want to allow unofficial material, then, work with your DM to introduce some, like, new magic items. That's definitely allowable, and that's something that I would do. So, enough dilly-dallying. Let's talk about the fighter, the Battlemaster fighter. So, opening this up here, to build a Pugilist as a Battlemaster fighter, what you're wanting to do here, according to Tasha's Cauldron, is you want to take unarmed fighting, which is a fighting style added in Tasha's Cauldron as your fighting style. And for maneuvers, you want disarming attack, evasive footwork, grappling strike, menacing attack, pushing attack, riposte, and trip attack. I can already tell you trip attack is kind of worthless. I think that's the one that's kind of worthless. Yeah, it's not that great. Riposte is always good to have. You should take riposte no matter what you're doing. Menacing attack is also pretty good. And then grappling strike is another thing that was added in this particular book here. So let me go to grappling strike and kind of let you know what you're getting there. So, grappling strike. Immediately after you hit a creature with a melee attack on your turn, you can expend one superiority die and then try to grapple the target as a bonus action. Add the superiority die to your strength check. This pairs very well with what the unarmed fighting style allows you to do, which is your unarmed strikes can deal bludgeoning damage equal to 1d6 plus your strength modifier on a hit. If you aren't wielding any weapons or a shield when you make the attack roll, the d6 becomes a d8. At the start of each of your turns, you can deal 1d4 bludgeoning damage to one creature grappled by you. So yeah, I mean, basically what you do there is, at 5th level, you've got 2 attacks. So you can very easily, hit twice, grapple the guy after the second one, and then on your next turn, as long as you keep him grappled, as long as he doesn't make a save, you basically get to start out by, like, squeezing the chokehold on him. And you deal extra damage to him. So yeah, it's a cool thing that you're able to do. It does give you some more damage that you can deal at that point. And a D8 for unarmed damage is actually pretty good. You're roughly on par with what a sword and board fighter is doing. Once you get into like great weapon stuff, you're gonna run into some kind of gaps in damage, but there are ways to make up for that, kind of within what you're doing here. Being able to, deal that extra damage with that chokehold, like I was talking about, is also pretty good. So, without going too far into, what like a Battlemaster does, that's a pretty basic class. There's not a lot to know about that. I'll read a little bit for anyone who's kind of new to the game, what these things do. But when building a fighter, You want strength and con to be your highest stats. And then from there, it kind of stacks up of, do you want dexterity so that you can get good advantage and, good initiative and not die when someone throws a fireball at you? Do you want a decent perception check? Do you have any desire for any kind of charisma? And then just straight up don't take intelligence unless you are an Eldritch Knight. Having a decent intelligence isn't going to do anything for you as a fighter unless, like I said, you are an Eldritch Knight who uses intelligence as your casting modifier. So, right off the bat, you get a fighting style. This just kind of, grants you some bonuses to what you can and cannot do as a fighter. And for this one, we already read what unarmed combat does. That's from Tasha's. And then from there, let's see, at second level, you get... Actually, I think at first level you get second wind. Yeah, you get second wind at first level, which lets you take a bonus action to regain hit points, 1d10 plus your fighter level. And you can only use it once per short rest. Action Surge at second level. On your turn, you can take one additional action on top of your regular action and a possible bonus action. And this is once per short rest again. So basically, at fifth level, once you're doing 2 attacks per round, you do that to make 4 attacks. So that's another thing that, this lets you do over, say, a monk. Now, monks do get Flurry of Blows, so there's that, but this kind of puts you in that same boat of you can make 4 attacks in a given round. You can only do it once, though, whereas monks are limited only by their key points. So if all they're doing with their key points is Flurry of Blows, they might get the chance to do it more often than you would. But still, it's not terrible. And at third level, you pick your martial archetype. What we picked here was Battle Master. And then you get your extra attack at fifth level. So Battle Master, again, like all things fighter, this is really simple, but really effective. With Battle Master at fifth level, you have Combat Superiority, which lets you learn 3 maneuvers. You get 2 maneuvers at 7th, 10th, and 15th level. And your superiority die right now is a d8. You have 4 d8 to start with. Yes, 4 superiority die. So yeah, 4 d8 to start with. And for anyone unfamiliar with these, usually they let you add the die to damage or to some kind of check associated with putting your target at disadvantage, or subtracting from their roll, or making them fail a save. So as an example, if we look at Riposte, which is something that any Battle Master should take, as I've already said. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction and expend 1 superiority die to make a weapon attack against the creature. If you hit, add the superiority die to your attack's damage roll. So, like we said, with the unarmed attack, you're using a d8 because with this particular build, you don't have a shield. You do have armor, though, which, again, we'll talk about. So, at this point, your damage is going to end up being 2d8 plus strength modifier, which will be 4. And you have a +7 at this point to hit. So, you're already dealing a good amount of damage there. That's kind of what you're looking at with a Battle Master. And then something like menacing attack, just to go into what that is real quick. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, or melee attack, as Tasha's has changed it to accommodate this build, you can expend one superiority die to attack... lost my place there. To attempt to frighten the target. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll, and the target must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, it is frightened of you until the end of your next turn. So yeah, frightened creatures, that basically just kind of prevents them from attacking you. And then what we have here at the very end is Student of War. Student of War is kind of a useless addition to the Battlemaster Fighter. It gives you proficiency with Artisan's tools, which is kind of silly, but I understand what they were going for. You know, you want to be... Basically, the idea is you also have learned some kind of skill that helps with battle. Maybe you can forge, maybe you know leatherworking, cartography, something like that. Something that shows some kind of, I don't know, acumen for something in battle other than just fighting. Because the idea of a battle master is you're basically a general. Or an officer. You're more than just a straight-up fighter like a champion. You you have other abilities that you can do. You're more tactically minded. So yeah, aside from that, I am a mountain dwarf here. Morgren Anvilnose is my character. I'll show him to you guys here in just a little bit. This is actually a character who's going to appear in the novel series that I'm working on right now, if it ever actually comes out. That is, that's a story for another time, though. I'm basically working on my first book. I don't have a deal with anyone. I'm just doing it to do it and to see if I can, you know, get the thing published. But this is one of the side characters. There's going to be a lot of discussion of, like, my characters and how I would build them. That's going to be a whole thing this year, because it will help me kind of flesh out who these characters are and what they can do. And it's fun. I just like doing it. So yeah. Excuse me, Morgren Anvilnose. He is a mountain dwarf, which gives you a +2 to Constitution and a +2 to Strength. And then I got an extra +1 to Strength from taking the Tavern Brawler feat with my first ability score improvement. Which, anytime you can take a feat that ups one of your stats, lessens the sting of I'm taking a feat this time instead of upping one of my stats. Because you get to have your cake and eat it too. Even though the point of having a cake is to eat it, and that phrase is dumb. So yeah, you got, you know, proficiency in strength and constitution saves. I took athletics and perception as my skills, and then for being a criminal background, I got deception and stealth. Proficient with brewer's supplies from being a dwarf, leatherworker's tools from being a battle master, and then thieves' tools from being a criminal background. Speak Common and Dwarvish, And Dwarven Resilience, I believe, gives you advantage on Constitution saving throws against being poisoned. Which is nice. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the character. As far as how this character stacks up against others, you are more protected at lower levels than a monk would be. So, as an example, you get proficiency with heavy armor, and none of the features of the pugilist or of unarmed fighting makes you not able to wear that heavy armor. The only problem with that is the flavor, which can be a big problem if you're like me and you care a little bit about the sanctity of this is what my character would or would not do, or, you know, this is how they would or would not dress, or what weapons they would or would not use. So Morgran wouldn't necessarily wear heavy armor. Now the flavor here is that, or the excuse here for why my character, if Morgran were a D&D character that I were going to play in a campaign, I'd say, you know, he's leaving the arena, and he recognizes that in the arena, the most you're going to deal with is maybe someone, you know, dip their hand wraps in broken glass, and they're going to try and cut your face off with their hands. Or, you know, something like that, something that's easy to avoid. But out there, even though he, you know, is most reliant upon his two fists as his best weapons, there's going to be people out there who are using swords and axes and stuff like that. So rather than be a moron, he is going to sacrifice a little bit of his mobility, even though mechanically speaking, you don't sacrifice any mobility, and he's going to wear some heavier armor. That's kind of my reasoning as to why this dwarf is going out there with heavy armor on instead of what he would wear in the arena. But maybe you don't feel the same way, and, you know, you want to be unarmored. Maybe a dip in barbarian for your unarmored defense might do you some good. Maybe you want to go monk at that point. Although the reason why you wouldn't want to go monk here, and again, I've discussed this already, it's flavor. This does not feel like something a monk would do. Monks are very, you know, like physically and mentally disciplined. They're very, you know, stoic and stuff like that. They're religious. That's not necessarily what you get from a tavern brawler or, you know, a pit fighter. That's not really how, you know, some of the stuff in being a monk, you know, like being able to run on water. Your average pit fighter doesn't suddenly develop the ability to run on water. So there's a lot of kind of things that don't mesh. And, you know, multi-classing from monk to rogue or monk to fighter also doesn't really mesh well. And it's a lot of kind of, you know, you need a high wisdom and dexterity, but then you need a high strength and con as well. It's very difficult to pull off. So I'm going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to continue this conversation.
Gather round, one and all, and listen.
Sorry about that. And we're back. Alrighty. Need to remember to put a timestamp in there too. So real quick, I am going to switch over to Hero Forge and to Reaper to show you guys some options when it comes to, playing a dwarf pugilist. Because I like to, create the miniatures for these characters as well. Let's see, did I do one last time? I did not actually do one for the Artificer, I don't think. Now though, it's my bad. Usually I'll do like to show off kind of the miniatures that I've created, especially now that Hero Forge lets you color them. So let me go ahead and switch that one over. Alrighty, so first place we're going to start here is actually not Hero Forge, because a lot of times, in my opinion, if you want to get a miniature, there are a lot of great miniatures out there already. And if you're playing a dwarf pugilist, then Henrik here from Reaper is actually a pretty good option. I've got one that I painted not too terribly long ago. I'll show you here. See how well that shows up. You can see him better on my Instagram. This never works out when I show a miniature. But basically, if you want to play a dwarf pugilist, you can't really go wrong with that right there. I mean, that's pretty awesome. He's got, the spikes on his knuckles. He's very lightly armored. It's cool. That's a cool mini. You probably don't need to create a custom dwarf pugilist, because that right there is awesome. But if you wanted to, you could do something like this. This is my Morgran Anvil Nose. Now, if I'm being perfectly honest, when it comes to Hero Forge, their dwarves aren't great. Like you can see over here, this is what a human looks like, and that's what a dwarf looks like. One of the unfortunate problems with Hero Forge, and one of the reasons why I like Eldritch Foundry as much as I do, even though they don't really have great options for like a dwarf pugilist like this, their races look more distinct than Hero Forge. If I were to, go into a new hero and, we go human, that's a human. Elf still looks like a human. Half-elf still looks like a human. Dwarf looks like a short human. On and on. They all look human. Even, like, the orcs, the half-orc, that looks like a human. Just a big human. The only time you really get any kind of variance is when you get into the different facial types. So, like, even a half-demon still looks pretty human, just with horns. But like a half-dragon, that finally doesn't really look human. It looks a little bit derpy, but, that's not nearly as human-looking as the base human. Then you've got the anthrocanine and anthrofeline, don't look human, turtle people. But yeah, suffice it to say, with Hero Forge, your heroes are basically going to look like small humans, if they're humanoid. Or like, I don't know, more elegant humans. But yeah, this is Morgran Anvil Nose. I love the mullet. The mullet feature is great. I just kind of messing around, because I love to mess around with Hero Forge now that you can add color. I would never order the miniature colored, because I want to paint them, and it's expensive. But being able to add color to these miniatures gives you a guide when you want to paint, and helps, like if I'm writing, it helps me visualize what these characters look like. So yeah, this is Morgren Anvil Nose. It's a decent option. I do like the Reaper Mini better, though, to be perfectly honest. I like the Reaper Mini a lot better. But that's not bad. You'll notice that I tried to kind of sort of give him heavy armor. You know, he's got some plates on him, but he's still mostly shirtless. So it would kind of be like plate armor, but not really. It comes down to the difference between, you know, what are you willing to use your imagination on, and you know, what's just going to break your immersion. And a lot of that is different from player to player. I'm able to envision, you know, different kinds of plate armor where a particular particular character looks a certain way, but it still counts as plate armor. So, you know, this guy, instead of having like a full suit of plate armor, has like metal plates and stuff like that, and mostly just kind of makes up for it for being super tough. I know that would technically be half plate, but I don't care. It's flavor at this point. I've got a good enough imagination that I can imagine it. So, what I want to kind of round out the discussion with is just kind of comparing what this guy would do versus a fighter with similar stats. So, let's say damage-wise, you're dealing with a D8 plus 4 when you are dealing damage with this particular character. So as we've already established, if you are a sword and board fighter, you're dealing the same level of damage. So the comparison there there isn't one. The only advantage that you'd have is if you have plate armor and a shield, you're dealing you're dealing the same amount of damage. It's D8 slashing versus a D8 bludgeoning. But your AC is going to be 20. Which, with this particular build, your AC, unless you get, plus something armor, or, you find some other kind of magical item, your AC is going to pretty much top out at 18. So at that point, you might want to look for, like, a Ring of Protection, or, some kind of item to boost your AC. Some kind of potion or something like that. So as far as, this versus, let's look at a 5th level monk, which is how this is going to compare. And then I'll roll some damage kind of based on like a great weapon fighter is going to blow this out of the park because you're rolling at that point 2d6 versus 1d8. So if we look at like a 5th level monk, just need to get to the monk. All right, so 5th level as a monk, you are, you have 2 attacks. And let's see, you have... At this point, you're dealing a D4 for your unarmed attacks. Unless you're a Kensei monk. I honestly thought you'd be dealing more damage at that point. No, you're dealing a D4 for unarmed strikes, and then a D6, like if you're using a bow staff. So, let's say you hit as a monk with an attack. So at that point, you'd be looking at, with these stats, let's reverse the strength and dexterity because you're a monk. So you'd be looking at roughly 5 damage for the staff, and then 9 for the unarmed strike. Or sorry, 8 for the unarmed strike. Whereas with this particular build, you are making, or actually at that point you'd make 2 attacks, so another staff attack. This one would yield you 8 more bludgeoning damage. So let's look at the kind of the difference between that and what you'd be getting with a fighter. So at this point, let's see, you hit. We'll say for the sake of argument you hit. So at that point you'd be looking at, I rolled a 2 on my D8, so you'd be looking at 6 bludgeoning damage for the first attack. Second attack, that's a 5, so you'd be looking at 9 bludgeoning. And then let's say you successfully grapple. And at the start of your next turn, you are able to deal 3 damage from the grapple that you've got. So you stack up pretty well against the monk. You kind of outclass him, especially when you consider that the monk can flurry of blows, which adds 2 more D4s if they hit on both attacks. But the fighter can action surge. So let's say in one round you're going to action surge. So assuming you hit, let's say for the sake of argument, here I'll go ahead and roll 4 times. See how many we hit. So that's a 4, likely not going to hit. The other one's an 18, so that'll hit. 6 is also not likely to hit. 12, that ends up being a 19, so that'll probably hit. So that's 2 hits out of 4 attacks. So you'd be looking at 10 damage for the first attack. And 6 for the second, 16 damage. Out of 4 attacks, that's not great. But if you hit with, let's say for the sake of argument, you hit with 4. At that point, you're dealing with, I rolled an 8 that time, so, you'd be looking at 12 damage for the first attack, 10 for the second, 6 for the third, and 6 for the fourth. So you're putting out a decent amount of damage. The only issues that you're going to have to deal with are damage reduction and damage not scaling well. So damage reduction, if you come up against higher level creatures that are resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical items, at that point, you and your dungeon master are going to have to figure out how to make your unarmed attacks magical. Because it's really not fair for you to not be able to, your primary weapon does not deal damage as well at a certain point, especially when you get up to higher levels and it becomes immunity to non-magical damage. I think monks, I'll have to check my work here, I think monks actually might count as a magic weapon at some point. That might be like a Kensei thing, but monks also, use weapons at some point. Like you're using a bow staff or a short sword. So you're not completely without some form of damage. Your unarmed attacks are mostly supplementary as a monk. That's the problem. I'm a ranger. I'm going the wrong direction. Paladin. Monk should be right after here. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, so at 6th level as a monk, your unarmed strikes count as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. So, yeah, monks get that at 6th level. So that's just one level after what we're looking at here. So at a certain point, you do have to wonder, what about me? What am I going to do to make up ground as far as not having access to magical weapons? Yes, in theory, you can get yourself a magical sword for when that happens. But in practice, you are an unarmed fighter, and you want to be able to do your thing. You want to be able to say, I punched a dragon in the face and knocked him out. Because that is the game we're playing. You don't worry about reality. This is Dungeons and Dragons, and you want to punch a dragon. So punch a dragon. If Iron Fist did it, why can't you? So that's where this kind of breaks down a little bit. There's still not a good way to give these particular characters magic weapons. What I came up with, and what you'll see in the Pugilist guide that we looked at from earlier, is, people have homebrewed magical items. So it's just a matter of, can someone cast elemental weapon on you, or cast magic weapon on your fists, or something like that? Can you come up with some kind of brass knuckles that, work as magic weapons? I gave one of my monk players magical hand wraps that dealt fire damage. They had dragons on them. So yeah, there was a way around it. But I had to homebrew that way. And if you're looking at doing this for Adventures League, that's going to be a problem for you, because there's no way to make your fists magical. So in that regard, I'd say if you were playing this at a tabletop, with friends, something like that, and you have a DM who's willing to work with you, or willing to, take a look at other people's homebrewed magical items and make it so that your damage can continue to scale as other people's damage will, then you can do this and it'll be perfectly fine and you'll do well. If you're playing Adventures League, though, don't play this particular build. This isn't a viable build for any kind of super official, you can only use stuff that we've published, because there's no way to make your unarmed attacks magical as far as I know. Now, if you find something official in one of the books that lets you do that, please let me know, because I'd love to hear about it. But other than that, you're kind of left in the lurch. Because when it comes to unarmed strikes in D&D, the thought is that is something that a monk can do just as a side thing to using their staff or using their short sword. And it becomes magical for them, but everyone else is SOL. So that's a problem, especially if we're now going to treat the Pugilist as something that can be done with the Battlemaster Fighter. So yeah, that's really all there is to it, and that's really all there is to this build. If you want to use it at a table, or if you want to use the Pugilist, for what you're for this particular kind of character, I'd say do that. Talk with your DM, make sure everything can work out that way. And that's really how you have to do it. But for Adventurers League, don't touch this. This isn't going to work for you as far as Adventurers League goes. And honestly, I know I kind of set this up as you can do this officially with these guides. And the answer is yes, you can, but it's not going to be effective, and you might not have a good time with it as it's not as effective. So use this as a cautionary tale. This is not, my channel's not going to be about Adventurers League because I don't play Adventurers League. I don't play in that capacity. I do home games because I think home games are more fun. They're more loose, and they allow for me as a GM to create my own magical items and stuff like that. So, yeah. Just keep that in mind. And you'll have plenty of fun with this particular build, but I wouldn't recommend taking it to a official Adventurers League game. So, yeah. That's going to do it for our discussion of the Pugilist. All in all, this is a character type that I think is cool. I think rules should be elaborated on to allow you to do something like this, or should have been elaborated on to do something like this. Ultimately, what I think it comes down to is there's not much demand for it. And if there's not much demand for it, they're just not going to do it. So I imagine this isn't a super popular character type. It's probably pretty niche, but it's a niche that I would definitely, find myself in as, wanting a viable option for this particular kind of build. So that's unfortunate, but, it's the nature of the beast. Not everything is going to be amazing and awesome and super viable in all situations. So, unfortunately, you got to take the good with the bad there. But, that's really going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for dropping in. On Monday, we're going to do another episode of How Ryan Would Run. Basically, I'm going to be talking about superhero games and how I would handle superhero games. I'll be giving kind of my pitch for this is what a Marvel game would look like, this is what a DC game would look like, and then here is what my particular world looks like. I've run a superhero game before, I've played in superhero games. They're fun. It's another one of those things that I just want to talk a little bit about more because it's kind of like Western games or Star Wars games in that, everyone gets excited about it first. You play 1 or 2 sessions and everyone gets bored. So this is going to be about, 1, how to make 1 or 2 sessions fulfilling for everyone, and 2, how to make your players, want to come back for more and see more of, this world that you've created or this world that you're playing in. And, that's pretty much it for today's episode. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for having breakfast and coffee with me. And remember, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I'll see you next time.